Hello, everyone. It is Meredith again from the Axe Agency with another one of my little artists behind the curtain interviews. And today I am super excited to have with me an artist who is one of the newer artists onto the roster. And I had no idea that this incredible show existed because it has not really been available to performing arts centers before, even though it's incredibly well known to any of the audiences in the cruise industry. So I'd like to give a huge shout out, welcome to Gary Arbuthnot. Hi, Gary, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
So I just realized, I have a confession. I just realized that I kind of I zoom over your last name. I'm like,
you know what? That is something that everybody does. Arbuthnot is not exactly an easy name to roll off the tongue. And over the years, I've had many, many different versions of it. I can't tell you the different ways that maybe on a cruise ship, some of the cruise directors, especially if they're maybe English is not their first language, have attempted to say it. So
yes.
You're not the first one to glance over it. Quite all right.
Absolutely. And obviously you're hardcore from Brooklyn, right? Based on the
Oh,
accent.
yeah, that's right. Brooklyn, born and bred. No, not at all. Northern Ireland is where I'm from originally. I was born in a little town called Antrim, which is just outside of Belfast. For anybody that's been to Northern Ireland at all, it's one of the more beautiful counties in Northern Ireland. In fact, right up on the northeast coast, we've got one of UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. It's called the Giant's Causeway, a beautiful spot up there.
Wow.
Wonderful places such as the Bushmills Distillery, of course, for people that enjoy their whiskey. And yeah, it's just great country. I was very lucky to spend the first 18, 19 years of my life there. But since then, I've kind of traveled the world, and these days I'm settled in Las Vegas and Nevada.
Fantastic. And so I really hardly know where to begin. So first of all, Gary is known for being a masterful flute player, and yet when I mention flute sometimes to presenters, people think, oh, an entire show of just flute. Not at all. You are known for putting on these really neat productions. Tell us a little bit more about how that idea evolved, and where did you, probably first of all, is your flute mastery something that you picked up when you were in Ireland? How did this all transpire?
Sure. Well, the idea of somebody saying an entire show of flute, how would that work, is not something that's new for me to hear. This is something we've come across over the years. I remember when I first started working on the cruise ships 23 years ago, it was the same sort of idea. But what people should realize is, I think when they hear flute, they think this maybe classical concert. And if they're not particularly classical fans, they might think, oh, this is just something we really want to go to. It's going to be a little bit boring. How are they going to hold our interest? But I can honestly tell you that one of the best compliments I get when we do the show on the ships and these, big theaters on the cruise ships these days, is when people come walking out and say, hey, you know what? My wife dragged me along. We sat in the back row just in case we wanted to leave, but we stayed for the whole thing and we were enthralled and we loved it. We had no idea what we were coming to see. And so that to me is a great compliment, because it is. We've taken it to a lot further. My original background was in classical music, doing traditional classical concerts. I would turn up, myself and a pianist, let's say, and we would do a recital of whatever program. When I got onto the cruise ships, there is a much more mixed, diverse audience. And one of the things is we never know who we're going to see. Imagine telling one of your artists, hey, we're sending you to this theater. We're not going to tell you who the audience are. We're not going to tell you what music they like. Go and do your best. It's like throwing yourself into the lion's den every time you do it. But one of the great things is we have these diverse audiences. So I thought we've got to devise a show that will appeal to many, many different people. So I've kept some of the classical elements into it, but I've added a lot of my own Celtic music from Ireland. I've added a lot of movie music, for example, from some of the great movies people know, like Pirates of the Caribbean and Titanic, these iconic scores and songs that they will have heard. And we've also added in some of, great backdrops. We've synced the music maybe to some of the movies, for example. Or one of the favorite ones we have in the show, if people remember the wonderful ice dance couple called Torval and Dean, who won a gold medal back in the 1984 Olympics, we've managed to sync their routine with our version of Bolero, and of course it brings people right back to them, and it just adds all this different variety and exciting elements to the show.
And not only have you obviously pleased audiences, do you want to share with our viewers, you actually have, it's become an award-winning show, yes?
Yeah, I've been very lucky. Crystal Cruise Lines, which are basically considered the leading cruise line in the world, a few years ago voted me as Entertainer of the Year. And their audiences are very, very discerning. So it was a great honor to be the recipient of that. And, basically very well received across all the different cruise lines. I mean, I've worked on everything from the smallest yacht with 100 people on it to some of the biggest mega ships with thousands of people on it. And I said lots of different varieties of demographics from different countries. So this is definitely a show that appeals to everybody, young and old. It's high energy, but there's some of those beautiful songs. I mean, obviously from Ireland, anybody that enjoys Danny Boy, enjoys Riverdance, Fields of Athenry, these classic Irish songs. That's what we do in our Irish show, which is called Irish Party in Third Class, because we wanted to have a lot of fun in there. Of course, it's a reference back to, again, that iconic scene from Titanic. And then in our other shows, Stage and Screen, lots of those beautiful movie scores. As I said, Titanic, Braveheart, James Bond, James Bond fans, where we do Live and Let Die, or we do Skyfall, and even some of the old and classic movies as well. So, Gone with the Wind, for example, the beautiful Tyrus theme. So it's a very diverse program, and it's always a lot of fun. And so we make it much more interesting with the media and the backdrops and the productions, because I'll be honest, again, like you said at the beginning, when people say flute, it's not exactly the most visual instrument. It's not like when you have a violinist and they're going crazy and they can see, for example, if something's difficult. On a flute player, if I'm playing something slow and beautiful, it looks like this. If I play something high energy and virtuosic, it looks like this. We don't have the addition of the bows and all of this to give that visual aspect. So that's kind of where I started coming into adding maybe some of the backdrops and the more visual elements to help attach people to that sense, because that is one of the senses that might be missing.
Yes, and what I also love, and what presenters that I have been speaking with are loving, is your concept of it being able to be modular, right? So it's you and either a few musicians, or you can even add vocalists. You can add step dancers if you want that real vibrant party. And it's really, and so you can adapt to people's budget, but you can also adapt to the stage size. And I just think that's such a priceless component as you translate it to the performing arts market.
Absolutely. Sorry, no, absolutely. Just to back that up, I mean, we did a tour recently where it was just myself and a pianist, and then we enhanced that with all the amazing tracks that we've got. And because of the budget on that particular tour, they didn't have a budget to have a band and the dancers and the extra vocalists and all of that. But we can do it from as simple as a very small venue with the piano, the flute, and then to say all those great sounds you're hearing in those tracks and so on in the demos, that's what it sounds like in the theater, even with just myself and the pianist. We've spent tens of thousands of dollars on producing these incredible tracks, incredible video footages. So it doesn't matter whether it's the smallest venue or the largest symphony hall, we can bring, the same quality of show that will fit somebody's budget. And exactly as you just said, be it we bring in some guest vocalists, so we do some duets, or another guest instrumentalist, or Irish step dancers to enhance the Celtic element, particularly in the Irish show. So there is a wide variety of options available, only limited by the imagination. I'm always up for being challenged by a promoter to say, hey, this is what we've got, this is our setup, this is our budget, can we make this work? And I always love rising to that challenge to come up with something that will work for them.
Right. So let me ask you. I would guess that, of course, it's natural that you would have this amazing Irish show based on your heritage and the authenticity that you have in it. So, what is your connection with like the musical scores for films? How is that something so passionate that you that it grew to be an entire show for you?
Sure. For me, movie music has really been one of my favorite genres in music since I've been a kid. You know, from that moment of 7 or 8 years of age in the movies when, you know, that iconic Star Wars theme blasted across the cinema back in the late 70s. I mean, I was absolutely transfixed. And of course, you know, particularly with John Williams, for example, these huge symphonic scores. And so that's been a passion of mine. I consider it's like the modern day opera in many ways. You know, these are our film music score composers today writing these beautiful scores that we have that are now in the concert hall that survive in their own rights, be it John Williams, be it Hans Zimmer, you know, these amazing composers, Henry Mancini, of course, you know, and all those classic, the Pink Panther scores and Two for the Road and Breakfast at Tiffany's. And we cover a wide variety of these in the show. Part of my inspiration also came from Sir James Galway, which I'm sure many of your viewers will know, in my mind, the world's greatest flute player, who's still going strong today. But of course, some of his earlier recordings inspired me. For example, like the Henry Mancini album that he did with him back in the 1980s and showed, hey, you know, we can take a beautiful movie theme and make it sound as gorgeous on the flute as any classical piece. So we've taken that, and then actually when I went to my college, I was at the Royal Academy of Music in London. One of my favorite concerts that I did is actually the last one I did there at the end of my time. We did a film composers festival, and I was very fortunate I played as the principal flute in the concert we did with John Williams. So he came in and we did a whole concert of his program. So I tell you, sitting in the orchestra and you've got John Williams in front of you and you're playing Star Wars and Jurassic Park and Schindler's List and Indiana Jones and E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
It was thrilling. And so when I was designing the shows, I wanted to bring my passion for the film music into the shows as well. And as I said, so we have this Irish show. We have our stage and screen show, but they're not also exclusive. You know, we can mix and match, which I do actually usually a lot on the ships, because I get it. You know, not everybody might like movie music. Not everybody might like Irish music. I don't know how, but, you know, they might not like Irish music. And so we want, especially on the ships, we mix them together. So we have a bit of Irish, and then we have a bit of pop, and then we have a bit of movie music. And so that's another option that we can do as well.
So how fun must it have been to then say, wait a minute, the music is glorious. Let's add some multimedia to this and to add that whole visual quality. So tell us a little bit how that idea started percolating, and then how did you actually decide what you're going to put together, this visual montage to complement each of these shows?
Sure. So in the show, just as you said, we, not in everything, but in certain moments in the show, for example, let's say something like Pirates of the Caribbean, and we'll have clips from the movie, you know, that we get synced up with the music that are behind it. And that, some of that came about for me as well from, for example, going to, let's say, the Hollywood Bowl. I was just there recently, a few months ago. And again, it was another John Williams concert, and funny enough with Steven Spielberg narrating as well. And, you know, they're showing the Indiana Jones movie, and the orchestra are playing live with this. And, you know, when you are there and you hear, again, live music, live musicians performing to the score, or performing score, say, live with the movie playing, it's a whole other experience. And so I wanted to try and translate that into my own show. and add some of those elements where we were able to, again, play these great recordings, but also remind people, hey, this is this particular scene from the movie. Do you remember this? Irish Party in Third Class from Titanic, you know, or the Bolero that I do, or, as I said, Pirates of the Caribbean, or the Lion King. And people, you know, they relate to that. And of course, it just makes it even more enjoyable, I think. And as it enhances the experience, that makes it just not a boring flute show.
Exactly. I definitely would not call what you do a boring show by any stretch. So what's cool is that by also playing some things like Disney, like what are you hoping to also kind of, I don't know, to impact generations to come with what you're doing in your music right now?
I think it's just giving people the realization that there are other ways of performing, you know, the music. There's other ways in my consideration. There's other career paths to take, you know. Very much that has changed a lot in recent years, especially now with the advent of YouTube and internet and all of this. You know, when I was growing up, it was very much it's a traditional path. You know, you get your job in the orchestra, or you're a music teacher, or that was pretty much it. Nowadays, there's so many more paths available and so many more options of careers for people to take that it's great. I find it a wonderful opportunity to show somebody, could be a young player, for example, hey, you can do this. You know, this can be another fun experience that doesn't have to be the same as what everybody else wants to do, and that's okay. And in fact, recently there's been a few articles in some of the flute magazines talking exactly about that, just saying how many more opportunities and careers there are out there that you can be playing and performing. You know, I grew up in symphony orchestras. I was very fortunate to guest as principal flute in a bunch of different orchestras before I started on the ships. And then, you know, I walked away from that, which was a big risk. But I took the risk and put my own show together. And as I said, I've been doing it now 20 plus years at sea, and it's been very successful. And obviously through our collaboration, we're trying to, you know, take that very honed act now. I mean, when you think about it, when I did it on the ships 20 years ago, it was brand new.
Right.
So we've been taking 20 years of experience and honing and designing and structuring that show to a point where, you know, it's been getting great response on board. We want to take it to some of the performing arts centers around the country.
And 20 years of fans, I might add.
Oh, yeah.
20 years of nonstop.
I mean,
building.
People may not realize, for example, I think I thought about it not so long ago, but I think over the last 20 years, I mean, it's probably been close to 2 million people that I've done the show to.
Wow, that's incredible. That's
each week. I just did a ship last week, Princess Cruise Lines. You know, and their theater holds 1,000 people.
Wow.
And we did it twice that night, and that was 2,000 people that were at the show that evening, and had a great response. So if I can, you know, I can totally understand where people might be hesitant, especially if it's something they've not had before. I can only try and encourage you to let you know, I promise you we will bring you a show that you've never had, that your guests have never experienced, and they will go out raving about it.
Absolutely. And you know, there was definitely a time when most of the Irish shows were really a big novelty, right? I mean, starting with Riverdance, and yet obviously the appreciation for the Irish music specifically, and then when you embellish it with the multimedia, and again the option to add the step dancers, it really becomes, it's almost like a mini vacation without having to leave their hometown, you know.
Absolutely. As I said, just going back to what you said before about it being you know, inspiring younger generations, this tour we did recently in the Midwest, for example, we had so many young kids who were coming to the show, and they're transfixed. And when you think in a day and an era of, you know, where everybody just seems to be glued to their iPads and their iPhones, and, you know, I love the fact that these parents were bringing the young kids to live music, attending a live theater, and they sat there and watched the whole thing. Not once were they running around, not once were they, you know, wanting to get on an iPad or an iPhone. And I think part of that appeal also is the multimedia aspect we've added to the show, because it just, again, it meets that visual need that we all have. And so that's why I think it works.
I think it's fabulous. And so speaking of all these millions of fans around the world, are there a couple of moments that you remember through the years that will always stick out as, oh my gosh, this is why I do what I do, or part of the craziness of life of living on a ship basically for 20 years with the occasional trip to dry land, you know?
Right. It's kind of the opposite way around my life exactly at the moment.
Right.
You know what? I can tell you a couple of moments which have, you know, people might think, oh, it's the, you know, the dream must be like the standing ovations on the show or the Carnegie Hall or whatever. There's two moments that come immediately to my mind which struck me in my career. One is way back actually when I was still at college. And myself and a guitarist, we were doing this tour around the UK. And it was for an organization called Live Music Now. Now, Live Music Now was about bringing what we did in the concert hall to the local community. So that could be old people's homes, that could be hospitals, prisons, schools. And so we turned up at this school one day, which is for, you know, kids with various disabilities. And as we were lining in, the principal of the school came over to us and said, okay, just to warn you, you know, we have a few kids here, you know, they're maybe quite severely autistic or have some other issue, and so they may not be the most attentive. But we just want to let you know, but they'll love it, but we just want you to be aware of that. So we said, not a problem, we're used to that, that's absolutely fine. So we're playing this piece, what was the one? So the guitarist, Mark, he played this piece called Cavatina, which I'm sure, again, everyone will know from the Deer Hunter. And this one particular girl, I'm sitting to the side and Mark's sitting there playing on the guitar. And this girl gets up and comes up to him and literally stands right beside him. And I'm looking at Mark, he's looking back to me and thinking, what is about to happen right now? So, you know, is she going to suddenly like attack him? Is she just going to stand there? And she just stood there. Now, this is a girl that they told us didn't connect on a human level, but even any of the helpers in there. So they're suddenly seeing this change in her work, music as a way to communicate and connect beyond words. So she did that, and then she went and sat down. We play a few more pieces, and then I did a solo Irish air called Carrick Fergus. Mm-hmm. And as I'm playing, it must be something to do with the slow music, because again, she got up and I'm playing, and she comes over to me, and then she walks all the way around, and as I'm playing, she sets her head right here in my arm. Oh. Now the tears are coming off me. The staff are actually walking out of the back. They couldn't handle it. And at the end it was, you know, and again I finished, and she just stood up and she went and sat back down again. But that's when they had informed us. They said that never in 20 years of her being there had they ever seen her connect or with anybody like that. And so those are the moments to me that are so special. And then, you know, years later on the ships, there was a lady I was asked to go and meet with afterwards, and she was blind. Had been blind since birth. And again, just coming in and just feeling, hearing the music and sitting there, and she was so effusive about what we were doing and the show. Those are the moments to me that they just touch my heart, you know, and to me they're greater than any 2,000 people standing ovation, you know, because those are the true moments. Wow. Things like that, you know, we've had fun on the ships, of course, traveling the world. I always joke, very lucky, my beautiful wife is from Chicago. Her name is Claudia, and we had met on Holland America cruise ships many, many years ago. She was a dancer on the production cast. Mm-hmm. Of course, our relationship has been very much long distance. And then we now both live in Las Vegas, where she performs in some of the big shows here. But of course, I'm gone a lot. But I always do joke that, you know, I'm sort of gone long enough for her to miss me. And then I come home, and when I'm home long enough to annoy her, then she kicks me off again, and I go back out for another couple of weeks. So, it seems to work for us. It's, of course, everybody looks at it and think, how do you do this? But it's also all we know. So that to us is regular life. But yeah. I've been very blessed to travel the world. You know, exactly as you said, my life is the opposite. I work away and I vacation at home for the little bit. But and now, you know, obviously doing some more tours around the country will add that element to it as well.
Wow. Well, it sounds like, of course, you've already done some really, really powerful things with your music and making a positive impact on the world. And I can only look forward to now bringing it to the States and growing this. And I just commend you and appreciate you sharing your joy, sharing your musicality, your vision with so many people, and reminding those of us who are in the audience or those of us who work in the arts that there is a powerful unspoken language that resonates regardless of what political party we are, regardless of what color of our skin, where we live. There is one thing that unites us, and that is our soul, and music is the language that speaks to that soul, and
Absolutely.
you do it so beautifully. Yes.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes. Well, Gary, thank you so much for taking your valuable time on dry land to share these moments with us. Folks, those of you who are watching this, I hope you'll reach out. We're putting together some tours. And again, for all levels of the show, we realize that some of the venues are smaller, and yet others really are looking for the next kind of cool Irish production that isn't going to be yet another carnation of what now has become very familiar. So Gary is just a remarkable addition to my roster. I couldn't be more thrilled. So any last words, Gary?
Just, I think we've covered a lot of it today, but if anybody wants to, take a chance and bring us in, I can only promise you it'll be a night you will not forget. It will be something you've never seen before. And as I said, and also, I think you've said, Meredith, a few times, we can customize it, be it in the size, be it in the repertoire. We've got lots of different videos and so on that people can see an example of what we've done. But I can just promise you it will be a fun, high energy evening that everyone in your audience will walk away talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you again, Gary, and thank you for watching this. And once again, I hope that you're enjoying some of these looks at the artists behind the curtains, because these people are not only amazing performers and musicians, but they're phenomenal human beings that I wanted you to meet. All right. Until next time. Bye-bye.